Every boss has heard the standard lies. The fake cough, the dead car battery, the mythical flat tire. But what happens when an employee decides reality is optional and calls in with an excuse so spectacularly unhinged it belongs in a psychiatric journal? We found 50 times American workers abandoned basic logic and delivered masterpieces of absolute corporate evasion. 1. We all expect a flat tire or a dead battery. But you know your morning is officially derailed when livestock asserts dominance. A guy called his boss completely deadpan to report he could not leave his driveway. The reason? A massive cow had decided the hood of his sedan was a premium resting spot. It was not standing nearby, it was actively crushing the front suspension. At that exact moment, you do not argue with the employee. You just quietly accept that this gigantic bovine is the new head of the household and hope it has good auto insurance. 2. Blaming the family pet is a sacred tradition, yet this one shatters all known boundaries of logic. A panicked worker dialed in because his golden retriever had actually eaten his dentures. Not his favorite slippers, but his expensive prosthetic teeth. He was left entirely unable to articulate a single sentence on the morning conference call without sounding like a cartoon prospector who just struck gold. Honestly, the real mystery is why you leave your pricey mouth hardware laying on the nightstand for a dog to treat like a chewy bacon snack. 3. Suburban boredom mixed with a garage full of plastic pipes is a recipe for absolute disaster. A grown man requested emergency paid time off because he needed to conduct highly sensitive diplomatic negotiations with his next-door neighbor. His newly built custom potato cannon had functioned flawlessly, launching a massive root vegetable straight through the neighbor's double-pane kitchen window. Spreadsheets can wait. When you accidentally declare culinary warfare on the cul-de-sac, repairing those fragile domestic relations is your only priority for the day. 4. When it comes to the undisputed heavyweight champion of workplace absences, this guy takes the gold medal. A worker phoned his supervisor with a completely straight face to report he was currently sprinting for his life from a giant herd of enraged goats. There was a brief, stunned silence on the line. Then, cutting through the background noise, the boss could distinctly hear the frantic, demonic bleating of multiple horned animals on a rampage. As a manager, you do not even ask for a doctor's note. You just pray the guy survives the stampede. 5. A completely different kind of hostage situation unfolds when a middle-aged guy tries to aggressively relive his youth. After a desperately early morning surfing session, an employee found his wetsuit zipper hopelessly jammed. He phoned his office from the front seat of his car, physically unable to bend his knees or sit down properly. He sounded incredibly out of breath, permanently trapped inside a full-body neoprene sausage casing. He was not just going to miss the quarterly review, he had successfully transformed himself into a sweating monument to poor life choices. 6. You genuinely know you have hired an absolute wild card when their inability to clock in revolves around a hostile household bird. One administrative assistant claimed their brand new rescue parrot had somehow learned a relentless string of unimaginably offensive curse words. The feathered menace absolutely refused to stop screaming obscenities every single time the employee attempted to leave the bedroom. At that exact moment, corporate protocol goes straight out the window. The supervisor really should have demanded to speak directly to the parrot on speakerphone, just to verify the sheer vulgarity. 7. Mental health days are incredibly important, but sometimes the trigger is just entirely beyond human comprehension. A warehouse worker passionately argued they were far too unstable to operate a vehicle because of a rogue, highly intimidating orange traffic cone. Apparently, the plastic street marker had looked at them funny during their morning commute, instantly triggering a massive existential crisis. You do not even attempt to process the logistical nightmare of this statement. You simply grant the time off and quietly hope the traffic cone does not file a workplace harassment lawsuit. 8. Gravity is a harsh mistress, especially for dads trying to prove they are still cool. One supervisor received a frantic morning call regarding a sudden, devastating case of vertigo. The embarrassing root cause? The employee had spent the entire previous evening aggressively trying to master his 10-year-old son's brand new hoverboard. He wiped out spectacularly, and now the entire living room absolutely refused to stop spinning. He had successfully achieved a state of self-inflicted motion sickness so profound that simply staring at a blank computer screen would require medical intervention. 9. Nothing highlights the sheer incompetence of human problem-solving quite like this specific disaster. To deal with a minor mouse problem in the kitchen, a brilliant employee proudly purchased a live snake. Predictably, the serpent immediately escaped its terrarium and vanished deep inside the drywall. When the morning alarm rang, he told his boss he could not possibly come to the office because he was entirely too busy dealing with the terrifying consequences of his own spectacular stupidity. You have to respect that level of raw honesty while his house turns into a reptile sanctuary. 10. Baking bread at home is a fun little hobby, right up until it becomes a sentient biological threat. A panicked data analyst called the front desk, claiming they were physically trapped inside their apartment because their massive sourdough starter had mutated overnight. The expanding dough had completely blocked the front door from the inside. They described the yeast monster less like a tasty breakfast ingredient and much more like a rapidly growing alien organism from a cheap 1950s science fiction movie. You cannot just fire someone for this. You probably need to contact the National Guard. 11. Blaming your commute on bad traffic is for amateurs. This excuse bypasses human resources entirely and heads straight for the paranormal investigators. A completely serious marketing director stated that a ghost had maliciously stolen her car keys. She did not laugh, she did not stutter. She elaborated that this particular spectral entity was also famous for hiding her television remote on weekends. You simply have to stand back and admire the absolute audacity of a grown adult blaming their lack of punctuality on a petty, mildly annoying poltergeist who clearly has a sense of humor. 12. Forget about wild animals or traffic jams. This grown man fell victim to the absolute worst apex predator in the modern suburbs: his own misguided confidence in home repair. An operations supervisor frantically emailed his team to explain he could not possibly attend the quarterly review because he had attempted to seal a drafty bedroom window with industrial-grade expanding foam. Mid-squeeze, he violently sneezed, permanently bonding his dominant right hand directly to his own forehead. He was not just calling out sick. He was effectively stuck in a permanent, terrifying military salute until the emergency room could properly chisel him out of his own stupidity. 13. Sometimes you overhear an excuse so magnificently bold and utterly raw that it immediately transcends laziness and becomes pure modern art. An entry-level associate simply dialed the main switchboard and stated, "I am completely emotionally unavailable for corporate labor today." That was the entire explanation. There was absolutely no mention of a fake fever, no elaborate family drama, just a beautifully gentle, soul-deep personal boundary being established. You almost want to give them a standing ovation for the sheer honesty, right before you quietly email them a discount code for online therapy. 14. Imagine picking up the receiver only to hear your top salesman sounding incredibly compressed and panicky. They are not actually suffering from the flu. They are physically wedged and trapped. The location? Deep inside the automated blood pressure testing machine at a local grocery store. The robotic arm cuff had violently malfunctioned and decided to hold their left bicep indefinitely hostage. As a seasoned shift leader, you are instantly faced with a scenario absolutely no corporate management seminar ever covered. Do you immediately dial emergency services, or just ask the bakery manager to toss them a muffin? 15. Crying over sports is a time-honored tradition, but this specific tragedy is basically a desperate cry for professional help masquerading as a plumbing emergency. A devastated logistics coordinator claimed his upstairs bathtub was aggressively overflowing with his own bitter tears after his favorite football team spectacularly blew a championship game. He was not just feeling a little blue. He had magically achieved a level of sports-related emotional grief so incredibly powerful it was actively causing severe structural water damage. Forget about offering him a standard bereavement day. This wildly unstable man desperately needs federal flood insurance. 16. Good intentions mixed with a complete lack of basic biology usually lead to spectacular workplace absences. an overly empathetic graphic designer urgently needed 48 hours off because he felt a deep moral obligation to teach an abandoned baby pigeon how to properly fly. Neighbors reportedly spotted him standing dangerously close to the edge of his roof, furiously flapping his own heavily tattooed arms for visual encouragement. It was significantly less like a beautiful Disney movie moment, and far more like a grown man actively preparing to learn a remarkably painful physics lesson about concrete. 17. Almost every single office environment has that one extremely intense amateur athlete. However, this guy's chosen competitive sport was the highly aggressive world of regional bird calling. He phoned the morning shift supervisor, whispering incredibly hoarsely to explain he had severely blown out his vocal cords during the state championship finals. He did not just lose his ability to speak. He tragically lost the first-place trophy to a retired plumber who could flawlessly mimic a deeply irritated pelican. Frankly, some humiliating personal defeats are just vastly too heavy to drag into a Monday morning staff meeting. 18. Lying to your boss is common, but here is a breathtakingly beautiful example of a worker who was technically telling the absolute truth. The guy stated clearly that he was experiencing a devastating transportation issue. When pressed for specific mechanical details, the employee let out a massive sigh. He openly admitted his vehicle was running perfectly fine. He just completely forgot where he parked the damn thing after a wild night out downtown. He was not actually ditching his responsibilities. He was fully engaged in a desperate urban safari, hoping to track down a silver Honda Civic. 19. Moving right along into the incredibly weird spiritual sector of corporate America, we find this absolute gem. A highly paid consultant firmly stated she could not possibly operate a keyboard because her personal karma was severely out of alignment with her cubicle's electromagnetic energy field. This completely bypasses standard disciplinary procedures. This specific flavor of crazy requires an emergency office exorcist, a dedicated squad of ancient feng shui masters, and very likely a total structural demolition of the entire commercial property just to clear out the bad vibes. 20. Dealing with fraud is terrible, but this is a uniquely hilarious 21st century nightmare. An operations manager accidentally discovered his entire personal identity had been completely compromised. However, the ambitious criminal was not buying big-screen televisions or racking up massive casino debts. No, this highly motivated thief had utilized the stolen credentials to secure an incredibly lucrative executive position at a rival tech firm. The real guy urgently needed the afternoon off, not to call federal authorities, but to furiously update his own resume and figure out how his clone was vastly outperforming him in life. 21. The modern era has successfully invented entirely new ways to become completely unemployable without leaving the house. A junior developer frantically called his team lead because he had accidentally ordered 500 live feeder crickets online instead of a Cricket brand phone case. The package arrived overnight, and the delivery driver apparently left the cardboard box slightly cracked open. His entire studio apartment was now a deafening, pulsating insect orchestra. He was not calling in sick. He was standing barefoot on his kitchen counter in his underwear, surrounded by thousands of tiny jumping nightmares, completely unable to locate his car keys somewhere beneath the chirping swarm. 22. Normal people occasionally have moderately bad mornings, but this poor soul suffered a catastrophic meteorological event localized entirely within their master bathroom. Their frantic excuse was incredibly blunt. My porcelain toilet completely exploded. It was not merely clogged with paper, and it was not just gently overflowing onto the tile. It violently detonated like a high-budget special effects sequence from a Michael Bay action blockbuster. You absolutely do not demand a standard doctor's note for this level of domestic trauma. You ask for high-resolution photographic evidence and maybe a certified structural engineering safety report. 23. Nothing quite demonstrates workplace dedication mixed with a terrifying lack of hygiene, quite like this culinary disaster. A bakery assistant called the store manager and casually mentioned that his expensive false tooth had suddenly fallen out. Even worse, he strongly suspected it was currently baked deep inside the massive batch of glazed donuts he just delivered to the break room. On one hand, you truly have to admire his relentless commitment to retrieving his pricey dental hardware. On the other hand, absolutely nobody in that specific building is ever trusting a free powdered pastry again. 24. Ambition is usually a great corporate trait, right up until it violently collides with highly processed meats. A senior supervisor called the department head, barely able to breathe, claiming his body was entirely immobilized. The reason? He had miraculously won a highly competitive local hot dog eating contest the previous evening. You really have to sit back and deeply wonder what the ultimate grand prize actually was, and if a plastic trophy was genuinely worth sacrificing his entire digestive tract. Sometimes you just have to respect a man who prioritizes pure gluttony over quarterly earnings. 25. Creating your own insurmountable obstacles is a truly special talent. An incredibly lucky warehouse worker demanded a mandatory mental health day because he was literally trapped inside his house by his own spectacular success. He had recently won a massive lifetime supply of frozen pepperoni pizzas from a radio contest, and the aggressive overnight delivery had completely barricaded his driveway and front porch. He was now the undisputed king of a towering cardboard and mozzarella fortress, tragically unable to escape his own delicious prize. Honestly, the boss should have just asked him to bring a slice. 26. If you want to witness the absolute perfect crime of acquiring an unauthorized 3-day weekend, look no further. The bulletproof excuse was simply this: I have been federally mandated to appear in criminal court to directly testify against a highly dangerous cartel drug dealer. It is completely untouchable. Any middle manager who aggressively questions this narrative instantly looks like they are actively siding with the violent criminal underworld. It is a stunning, strategic masterpiece of absolute workplace evasion, effectively putting human resources in a checkmate position where they just have to smile and nod. 27. Artificial intelligence might be ruining the modern workplace, but nothing ruins a Tuesday quite like catastrophic cosmetic negligence. A senior payroll coordinator left a frantic voicemail claiming she was legally unfit for human consumption after falling completely unconscious inside a dangerously unregulated strip mall tanning bed. She did not merely acquire a slight summer glow or a minor sunburn. She woke up looking exactly like a heavily irradiated, violently glowing orange cheese puff. She strongly demanded 3 business days of pure isolation just so her terrified children would eventually stop crying every single time she walked into the kitchen. 28. Outsourcing your daily decision-making is the ultimate executive power move. One completely fearless employee calmly informed their regional director they could not safely commute because a strip mall psychic had experienced a terrifying, vivid vision of a fiery freeway collision if they drove that specific morning. You cannot even attempt to formulate a logical argument against this strategy. What exactly is the supervisor supposed to fire back with? Oh, I am so sorry, but my personal tarot card deck vastly disagrees with your psychic's cloudy crystal ball, so get in here right now. 29. Working from home clearly presents unique, highly dangerous physical challenges for the incredibly uncoordinated. An aspiring amateur illusionist nervously contacted his department head to report a devastating remote work emergency. While aggressively practicing a brand new escape trick near his kitchen counter, he had accidentally handcuffed his own left wrist to the handle of his stainless steel refrigerator. He completely lost the tiny key, and now his entire professional career was aggressively on hold until a local locksmith could successfully rescue him from his own terrifying kitchen appliance. Houdini is definitely rolling in his grave. 30. Motivation is incredibly dangerous if you do not possess basic athletic coordination. After aggressively binge-watching way too many financial success videos on social media, a fired-up accountant attempted to literally seize the day by violently leaping out of his mattress with absolute newfound vigor. The tragic result? He completely misjudged the physical distance and face-planted directly into the sharp corner of his mahogany dresser. His Tuesday was definitely seized, all right? But mostly by a moderate concussion, an emergency room copay, and a profoundly deep sense of personal irony. 31. Having a pet is normal, but establishing a deeply codependent psychological bond with a tiny aquatic creature is a massive red flag. One fully grown adult man called his manager, voice violently trembling, to report a devastating household tragedy. His $2 carnival goldfish was officially clinically depressed. He absolutely could not abandon its side during this dark time. He tearfully explained the fish was just floating there, completely ignoring its tiny plastic scuba diver figurine. The stunned boss had zero protocol for this, simply whispering, "Tell the fish the entire sales team is pulling for him." 32. Corporate America is absolutely packed with wild conspiracy theorists, but this guy takes the cake. A terrified stock boy aggressively claimed he could not safely walk to the bus stop because he was being actively stalked by a highly suspicious-looking ceramic garden gnome. He completely insisted the tiny bearded statue was magically teleporting from lawn to lawn, getting aggressively closer every single time he blinked. At this specific juncture, the company basically has a legal duty to either dispatch a psychiatric wellness check or heavily arm the employee with military-grade surveillance equipment to catch the gnome. 33. Putting out fires is part of management, but nobody ever prepares you for this wildly specific phone call. The employee on the line does not have a raging fever, and they certainly did not pop a flat tire. Instead, they completely calmly explain that their extremely fat orange cat has somehow managed to get permanently wedged deep inside the plastic dashboard of their Honda Accord. Is this a mechanical emergency for a body shop or a job for a professional animal whisperer? You are just left staring at your desk, wondering if the feline is currently changing the radio presets. 34. When you need a day off, sounding like a high-priced defense attorney is a bold strategy. A corporate lawyer stated in an official email that he could not safely perform his daily contractual duties due to sudden, violently aggressive flatulence that posed a direct, immediate threat to the entire office's indoor air quality. He was not just claiming he had an upset stomach. He was formally declaring his own digestive tract a federal biohazard zone. You simply have to fiercely respect the incredibly formal, legally binding terminology used to describe incredibly bad gas. 35. Normal people call in sick with migraines, but this absolute legend called the front desk with a fully fleshed-out blockbuster movie script. The wildly dramatic excuse was that he had attended a casual birthday party the previous night, only to inexplicably wake up in a completely different time zone with zero memory of the flight. You can practically hear the booming cinematic trailer music playing in the background. This is not just an unexcused absence. It is a spectacular, globe-trotting adventure. It is most likely a massive lie, but it absolutely demands a theatrical sequel. 36. Monitoring the local weather forecast is standard practice, but this particular worker strictly bases their attendance on the galactic alignment of the solar system. Their aggressively confident excuse was simply that the planet Mercury was currently in deep retrograde, meaning they completely refused to trust their own volatile aura anywhere near the office's sensitive electronic equipment. Honestly, the corporate laser printer has already suffered enough paper jams this quarter. It is probably best to just let this cosmic traveler stay home and burn expensive sage until Microsoft Outlook magically stops crashing every 20 minutes. 37. Dietary mistakes happen, but this is a culinary disaster of monumental proportions. A highly paid software engineer claimed they were violently vomiting after accidentally consuming an entire can of cheap wet cat food instead of premium tuna. The sheer volume of questions here is staggering. Was the kitchen light broken? Do you just completely refuse to glance at basic packaging labels? Is your sense of taste entirely paralyzed? This is not just a pathetic excuse to skip a Zoom meeting. It is a terrifying cry for an adult literacy class and vastly better pantry organization. 38. Office drama is one thing, but sometimes an excuse reveals a raging five-alarm fire of domestic chaos that you want absolutely zero part of. Consider this absolute masterpiece of misery. A guy called in crying because his extremely furious wife had just discovered his secret affair. As revenge, she permanently superglued his polyester work uniform directly to his bare chest while he was sleeping. As a completely terrified shift manager, you do not dare ask for a medical certificate or photographic proof. You just aggressively whisper for him to take all the time he needs. 39. Following basic personal hygiene instructions should not be a life-threatening event, yet here we are. A retail cashier called the store heavily slurring every single syllable, trying to explain they had accidentally become wildly intoxicated on blue mint mouthwash. Apparently, they somehow convinced themselves the gigantic warning label said enthusiastically chug instead of spit and rinse. Forget about demanding a standard corporate drug test. This spectacular individual desperately needs a preschool reading comprehension exam. Their morning breath might be incredibly minty and fresh, but their long-term career prospects are suddenly looking remarkably toxic. 40. Picture the sheer, unadulterated chaos of a corporate phone call where the employee is literally whispering through a thick cloud of plaster dust. An overly confident financial analyst decided to bypass hiring an expensive professional to fix his broken electric clothes dryer. Instead of saving $80, he somehow aggressively bypassed the main breaker and caused his heavy-duty water heater to launch straight through the ceiling like a Soviet ballistic missile. It is a highly creative lie, or it is the single greatest argument for never, ever trusting a man with an Excel certification to handle heavy voltage. 41. Trying to maintain a youthful glow is dangerous business in the modern world. A panicked real estate agent called his broker to report a massively severe allergic reaction. The culprit was a highly expensive, trendy, all-natural organic avocado face mask. His facial features had aggressively swollen to the absolute breaking point, leading him to tragically describe his own reflection as looking significantly less like a human man and vastly more like a horribly rejected, terrifying green Muppet. Apparently, luxury spa days occasionally decide to fight back with a brutal, disfiguring vengeance. 42. Sometimes an excuse is less about physical illness and vastly more about a deeply personal declaration of war against the modern fashion industry. A middle-aged marketing executive proudly claimed they could not physically walk into the lobby because their brand-new, incredibly expensive skinny jeans were tailored so aggressively tight they had completely cut off all blood circulation to their calves. They were effectively being held hostage by their own premium denim trousers. It is a wildly pathetic cautionary tale for absolutely anyone desperately attempting to squeeze into the exact same wardrobe they wore in college. 43. Avoiding responsibility is an art form, but this specific maneuver is an absolute masterclass in deferred cosmic accountability. A lazy copywriter called his supervisor, completely deadpan, to state that he was currently sitting on his porch waiting for a highly specific sign from the universe on whether or not he should clock in today. He was not bleeding, he was not coughing. He was just aggressively outsourcing his entire professional existence to random atmospheric coincidences. The deeply annoyed manager was highly tempted to send a cosmic sign right back, specifically in the form of a heavily stapled termination notice. 44. Corporate wellness trends have officially gone entirely too far. A desperate graphic artist refused to leave his apartment, claiming he had tragically misplaced his highly valued emotional support rock. He was absolutely not trying to be funny. He violently sobbed while describing it as a particularly smooth, incredibly calming chunk of river granite, insisting his entire nervous system was completely paralyzed with anxiety until it was safely recovered. His total monthly productivity was now being aggressively held hostage by a tiny, completely worthless piece of missing landscaping geology. You cannot even write this stuff. 45. Vanity can occasionally mutate into an absolute weapon of mass professional destruction. A wildly hysterical sales representative called the front desk drowning in tears. The tragic reason? Her expensive Beverly Hills plastic surgeon had spectacularly botched her recent nose job, and now she claimed she looked exactly like a highly controversial celebrity she deeply despised. The terrifying crisis was not about post-operative pain or physical recovery. It was an aesthetic vanity emergency of the absolute highest order. Management probably should have just mailed a generic sympathy card addressed to whoever the hell you look like now. 46. Overestimating your own physical agility is a guaranteed ticket to massive public humiliation. A fully grown 40-year-old logistics manager foolishly decided to relive his glorious youth on a neighborhood playground swing set during his morning jog. He ended up getting inextricably, aggressively wedged inside the rigid plastic seat. He was not dialing his boss to request a casual mental health day. He was frantically calling from his brand new, highly tragic life as a permanent cautionary park installation, while a massive crowd of judgmental toddlers actively gathered around to point and laugh at his misery. 47. Bypassing human resources to consult a much higher, vastly more delicious authority is an incredibly bold attendance strategy. A junior executive demanded the entire Friday off because a cheap takeout fortune cookie he cracked open the previous night gave him a highly specific, direct military order. It simply read, "Stay safely at home and deeply embrace tranquil energy." He confidently argued he was merely following strict universal instructions. You genuinely cannot argue with ancient crispy cookie wisdom. In fact, that specific clause regarding baked goods dictating your work schedule is probably buried somewhere deep inside the corporate handbook. 48. Sometimes, an employee's desperate excuse forcibly opens a highly unwanted window into an incredibly bizarre personal life. "I must unfortunately remain at my residence," a quiet IT technician explained with chilling calmness, "because my female llama is currently going into aggressive labor." The deeply confused regional manager, who had absolutely zero idea this guy even owned a hamster, was suddenly forced to process the shocking reality that his subordinate was apparently operating a secret suburban petting zoo. The obvious follow-up question regarding the baby animal's gender was definitely not covered in the corporate leadership manual. 49. The internet is a highly dangerous diagnostic tool for the chronically lazy. One particular desk clerk did not just feel slightly unwell. He aggressively felt historically unwell. After a furious 5-minute search on a medical form, he confidently self-diagnosed with a ridiculously rare 18th century aristocratic ailment, known simply as the vapors. He loudly claimed this phantom disease made him incredibly prone to violent fainting spells at the mere sight of complex Excel spreadsheets. His deeply unamused director dryly noted that the vapors were also an incredibly common symptom of it just being a rainy Tuesday morning. 50. You absolutely know you have hired an incredibly special breed of human being when their morning absence involves deep psychological warfare. A terrified junior buyer did not pop a tire. He aggressively sobbed into the receiver, explaining he simply went to pick up a cheap patio umbrella from an online classified ad. He walked into the wrong suburban backyard and accidentally became the central figure in a deeply unsettling, robed neighborhood cult initiation. He desperately needed the next 48 hours off, strictly to deprogram his own brain and figure out how to respectfully decline his new role as the supreme grand wizard of the cul-de-sac. All right, I am calling your bluff. I know for a fact at least half of you watching this have lied to get out of a Monday shift. Go to the comments and confess the most ridiculously pathetic excuse you actually used. I will absolutely judge you. Hit subscribe and leave a like while you are down there, unless your emotional support rock suddenly told you not to.